Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to thank you for coming to our Impact Hour with our social work influencer of the day, Noelita Lugo. Noelita, we're so excited to have you here today. Noelita is a graduate of our program and has been a long time advocate for children and families in many of the different positions that she's held. And now she's entering the world of campaign and politics, running for AISD school board position. And we're so excited to learn more about that, and also how social workers can make this transition into an area that's much needed in terms of our influence. So without further ado, here's Noelita Lugo.
All right. Thank you all so much for having me, for inviting me, and for those of y'all who are joining. I am going to look down here and pull up my screen. All right. So yeah, so my name is Noelita Lugo, and I am a twice UT alum. So I came to UT 25 years ago. Believe it or not, it goes by in a flash once it's over. So 25 years ago, I came to Austin from Houston. I earned 2 BAs, one in English and one in psychology. And, you know, now that I look back, I think, what was I thinking? I came from a working class family. I was the first to graduate from college in my family, although I'm the third and the youngest of my 3 siblings. I majored in English and psychology because I thought both of those were really cool. And like I said, now looking back, I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy that I was like, I'll just major in stuff that I think is cool. But it's worked out for me, actually. So I thank God. And then I came back to UT to complete my Master's of Science in Social Work. So I'm so I love the opportunities that I had, the people that I met, both in undergrad and in graduate school. So I'm really glad to be here today, even virtually. Let's see, so back then, I graduated in 2009 with my MSSW. And at that time, the track that I was in, the macro social work track, was called Community and Administrative Leadership. I think it's called something else now. But that was what I was most interested in, is looking at, you know, how can we influence public policy, social service programs, but really bring that social work lens and perspective to these persistent problems and social justice issues. So I've kind of taken a little bit of a odd but interesting track in my career. And so what I wanted to do, if we can, just momentarily, is if y'all can go to this website, menti.com. If you have your phone, you can take a picture of the QR code, or you can go to that site and pull up that code. And now let me see if I can share the website with you. So if y'all could I just want to kind of get a sense of who all's in the audience. Okay, as a grad student, undergrad, awesome. Other, okay, very cool. Okay, so kind of all alum, yay. Very cool. Okay, I think that might be, how many participants do we have? 14, okay. Very cool. All right, so kind of spread out across various experiences. All right, cool. Thank you for sharing that with me. So, like I said, I'm a twice alum, but I'm happy to be here to chat with you guys a little bit about the cross-section between social work and public policy, social work and advocacy, and last but not least, public office. And so for me, you know, I didn't know it at the time, but when I was 10, I had made a promise to myself to find a way to help families and children. I at that time, I thought that my path in life was going to be that I would be a family law attorney. I grew up not just in a working class family, but I grew up in a household where there was family violence. And it wasn't until the last few years of my life where I've become more comfortable and open with talking about that. Because for a long time, I felt a lot of, first of all, I felt like it wasn't, like there were other kids who, how do I describe this? I felt like I didn't have a right to talk about the experiences I grew up with. And oftentimes I would tell myself, and this was especially like in my teen years and in my 20s, I would say, well, you know, I was never burned with cigarettes, so like it's not that bad. But as I've gotten older and as I've seen what our childhood trauma did to me, to my brother, to my sister, I recognize that as a really traumatic time period. And so when I was 10, I thought, okay, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that other kids, that other families don't have to struggle like this. And then, you know, like I said, along the way, I, you know, came to UT, did my majors, and I spent 20 years working for the child support division, which most folks, if you have any connection at all to the child support system, it's probably going to be either a perception of the system as overly punitive, which is absolutely accurate in terms of how child support originated in the mid-70s. It was a punitive system and still to a lot of extent tends to be punitive. But during my 20 years with the agency, not only did I work directly with families, negotiating court orders, you know, trying to navigate, like, how do you collect child support when the parent who owes support can barely support themselves. So I saw that very up close, and then over the years worked my way up through the agency and had just really been blessed with so many opportunities to work on what we call family-centered child support services. And that's really looking at how does the child support system in fact tend to exacerbate the problems between caregivers and parents, and what could we do to get at some of the root causes. And I definitely recognize that the child support system has a lot more work to do, even here in Texas, but I know firsthand that where we are with the system today compared to where we were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, it is truly headed toward progress and toward a more holistic approach. And so with that, oops, let me go to this next slide. There we go. So with that said, and let me move this, oh, there we go. So with that said, I really feel like social workers and public policy make this beautiful relationship. I would often say that if there's a way for us, as we move into public policy work, if there's a way for us to also have that frontline or direct service experience in whatever field that we tend to, or that we're going to participate in, you know, welfare, workforce, child support, foster care, to really have some of that on the ground experience, it's really invaluable. But one of the great things that I feel social workers, or those of us who are trained in social work, tend to bring is a genuine interest in listening, in learning, in empathizing professionally with the individuals that our system is intended to work with. So for child support, it's empathizing with and understanding the lived experiences of custodial parents and non-custodial parents and the children in those households. And the other thing is that just from my own personal experience with public policy and social work, you know, I was already working within the child support division when I decided to get my graduate degree, get my master's degree. And I had looked at, potentially getting a master's in public administration, in family and child. There was another program, and now it's slipping me, but it was a master's in family and child systems. But I decided to pursue an MSSW because, again, for me, that felt like that had a really good balance of micro to macro understanding of how complex and persistent these, the various social problems and social injustices persist. And then how to address those in community, with communities rather than for, which often tends to really only complicate problems rather than really solve them, because it's folks that are doing something for people rather than with them, and really recognizing and honoring the self-determination, the autonomy that we all have and should be given. So the other thing I wanted to mention is, during my time in child support, I saw some of the internal systemic issues with how our system was working and not working. So for example, things like what are the hiring practices? What are the promotion practices? What types of behaviors are being rewarded? And when I started back in 2000, the types of behaviors that were rewarded were staff who were really good collectors and particularly skilled at viewing child support cases from a debt collection standpoint. Now, my standpoint, and thankfully the way that child support has started to move into the direction, is that we aren't debt collectors, that although the role in the mid-70s was absolutely primarily about, how do you bring back money into the government, money that was provided to families, at that time it was called AFDC, but welfare payments. How do you bring back or recoup that money from the parent who left the household? And back then it was, statistically, it was mostly fathers who were leaving the household. Percentage-wise, it was mostly like divorced families that were coming into the child support system. And so it was a very punitive, kind of like narrow system. Now, contemporary child support customers and families are really much more diverse than that. It's again, statistically, it's mostly heterosexual couples. So it might be that the custodial parent could be the mom or the dad, a caregiver, a relative, and then the non-custodial parent is either the biological and legal father or the legal mother. And so it's still kind of oftentimes seen as from that kind of lens. We also, of course, have families where you have same-sex parents, and they're trying to navigate this system that was designed, for a heterosexual couple. And so those families are still trying to figure, our system is still trying to improve how it provides services to those families. And so all of that to say, there are really many layers of internal systemic issues, and it comes back down to, how do these systems view themselves? What's the purpose of the system? Who do they hire? Who do they promote? What kind of training are they providing? What kinds of skills and coaching is offered to frontline workers and to managers? Because all of that really will drive the direction of change. So you can have an agency that talks really beautifully about, equity, or you can have an agency that talks really beautifully about empowering families and parents. But if you don't have the fundamental pieces in place, internally, then it's going to be mostly lip service. So beyond just those internal issues, it's of course external systemic issues. With respect to child support, it's what kinds of messages are parents receiving about the child support system. You know, oftentimes what I've heard is, you know, oh, well, you know, usually it's men. So upwards of 90% of non-custodial parents are fathers. So oftentimes it's the dad who says, well, she put me on child support. And so it's seen as a thing that's done unto a parent. And part of that is not just the services that are given, but also the manner in which they're delivered. And of course, the messages that fathers receive in society. I think also along with that, it's messages that families receive when they're trying to access social service safety net programs like TANF and adult Medicaid. And the other thing I would say about those external issues is that, especially when it comes to my experience with child support, you know, there is often talk about, well, you know, we just really need to do a better job of respecting fathers and talking about dads and really honoring the role that they play in a family's life. And I believe that that's true. And I think that if we, the system, child support system, if we think that that's kind of where our responsibility hits a wall, then we're doing a disservice. Because it's not just about those external societal issues. It's about how are we, in our everyday action, in our public policies, in our execution of those practices, how are we demonstrating that we value and respect the role that parents have to play, regardless of whether or not they themselves are struggling with economic security and financial security. How are we demonstrating that we respect them, that we want to work with them, and that we can find some solutions together? So that would be, again, where I really feel that social workers can bring a unique lens, because we do see how public policy should be people-driven, which I really love this pyramid. I did not make that pyramid. You can see the photo credit, but I really love it because we cannot just look at public policies in terms of numbers and percentages. We have to really assess how do these public policies and practices, what's the actual impact on people's lived experiences on their everyday lives. All right. So that's a little bit about that. And this feels a little odd because I know we're reserving questions to the end. And it's also a little weird because we're virtual. So I'm like, I'm getting no body language, no people vibe. So I look forward to questions and the conversation after the presentation. So a little bit about community advocacy. So I'll share again from my own personal experience what that's looked like. And you can see the image that I've shared on the screen. You know, my own description of myself would be that I don't really see myself as an activist. I more so see myself as, or have tended to see myself as an advocate, as a broker of information, as a collaborator. That's where I feel like it draws from not just my strengths, but from my personal philosophy and of course, just what feels most comfortable. So in those times when I have performed in more of an activist role, I actually felt really surprised about that. And so an example of my activism is last year, so in 2019, in the fall of 2019, the Austin Independent School District named 12, mostly elementary, but a couple of middle schools, named 12 schools to be closed. The majority of those schools serve or are in communities that serve majority Hispanic and African American students. Most of those schools have a high percentage of students who are identified as low income, who have special education needs. And the district identified those schools for closure despite the fact that in 2017, our district asked Austin voters to pass a $1 billion bond. And that bond, so basically it's how the school district can use money for facilities and operations. So the district got this 2017 funding mechanism passed by voters. And part of what the district told us was that, you know, we're going to use this money to invest in campuses that are under-resourced. So I voted for it. I believed it. And then you fast forward to 2019, and it's the schools that are on the closure list are the schools that we were told would receive funding. But if they close, those funds then go into a separate bucket and can be used for non-essential projects. And so that's where I put on my activist hat, and I was like, I'm calling BS. And I held a press conference in December. I've done lots of things, including co-founding Save Austin Schools. You can find I think you can still find the website online, and Facebook group. And what bothered me most about the process was that the narrative that was being pushed by the district and by those who wanted to see those campuses closed, the narrative was, you know, the only way that we can provide better services to our Black and Brown students is if we close their schools, and that's how we're going to save money. And then we promise we're going to give them better education. And that's deeply upsetting for I think reasons that are probably obvious, but for reasons that were not as transparent during the conversations. So I was very fortunate in that I knew several parents who we banded together from the various schools on the closure list. We dug into information, we submitted public information requests, and the more that we dug and the more that we found, the more it became really clear that part of the driver was that if you close the schools, the East Side Austin schools, that you could sell that land for hundreds of millions of dollars. And that there were developers and real estate folks that were working really hard to make sure that that land would be freed up. And so that's where I really, like I said, I put my activist hat on. I called a press conference. I put together, you know, coalitions. I joined other groups, and I was like, this is gross, especially as a public servant myself. I thought, you know, we have a school district, we have school board trustees who are either unwittingly participating in this system. So that should be called into question, because like, why aren't y'all digging into this information? Or they're knowingly participating in that type of system. So that was my activist role. I'd love to chat more about that, but I'll move on to some of the other examples. Advocate, like I said, that's where I think I feel my most comfortable, because part of what I really enjoy about the social work perspective is you want to meet people where they are. And for those of us who have gone through social work training, maybe that becomes cliche, but it's absolutely true. Like, you want to be able to hear other people's experiences, build mutual understanding, and we genuinely value collaborative solutions. And so I've enjoyed really serving in that community advocacy role with other coalitions around special education issues, dual language programming, and then of course getting to know what are the challenges and what are some potential solutions for how our school district and our city can work together with communities to really kind of provide supports and a safe community for families who have immigrated to the United States. And you can also see some of the other examples about my, organizing, nonprofit, and volunteerism work. I will say one thing, and then I'll move to the next slide, is that I in my professional life, because I was working on, statewide initiatives, nationally recognized programs, I wasn't paying as much attention to local issues that were right here in our own backyard. And I know that we are only just one person and there are only 24 hours in the day. But I do think that even when we are working in our professional lives to make the world a little bit better in whatever way we can, now that I look back, I also really believe and feel that we also have to pay attention to what's happening locally, because that's right here where we live. And I am running for school board in part because I know that there is more that I can do, and I want to do everything that I can to not just make children and families' lives better through state and national policies, but do my part to help kids succeed in life by helping our city. And so hang in there. I know there's a lot to do, but yeah, if you can find a way to take care of yourself first, because really you can't do anything else if you're not healthy and feeling well. Take care of yourself first, and then there is a spectrum of advocacy that you can do, and just finding your place along that spectrum. And you may find that you've already played multiple roles, or that you really enjoy playing those multiple roles. And we need more social workers to do that. All right, so I'll move to the next one. So social work and public office. So one of the things that I look forward to hearing from y'all is, why do y'all think social workers make sense in public office? I know I think that, and I'll share it with you in a second, but I would love to hear your thoughts about it. On the screen, you can see 3 different women who serve in various public office roles. So Jessica Ortega Ochoa, she is a city councilwoman in Mission, Texas, and happens to hold an MSSW. Sylvia Garcia is a senator. She represents Texas Senate District 6 and has a BSW. And then Barbara Lee, so I had heard about the Social Work Caucus, the U.S. Congressional Social Work Caucus. So I looked it up and I was like, oh, I wonder who's the chair. And Barbara Lee is the chair of that Congressional Caucus. And I really welcome y'all to, or invite y'all to look up more information about the Congressional Social Work Caucus, as well as who it was founded by. So it was founded by Congressman Ed Towns in 2010. So it has, it's not, 10 years. But yeah, I think, again, this is a testament to the fact that we really do need social workers serving in public office. I think most especially those of us who never imagined running for office, we probably make the best public officials, because it's not about ego, it's not about proximity to power, it's about truly making public policies that are people-driven, that are human-centered, and that work across not just government agencies, but work across the various communities, nonprofits, and for-profit organizations. Because if we're not working together, then unfortunately, I think oftentimes we're chasing crumbs, or we're, kind of dividing among ourselves. And in this day and age, I think we've seen just how detrimental it is when we don't find a way to build common ground, when we don't find a way to see each other's humanity and to really build from our mutual values. I think oftentimes we share more than what we realize. And even when solutions are coming from very distinct perspectives, I think there's a tremendous amount of value in having those conversations from those varying perspectives, so long as there's a baseline of human respect, right? Like I think we need to be really clear about what our ethical boundary is, what our moral boundary is. So I hope you don't take that to mean like, you know, we should collaborate with every possible group. I think we need to collaborate with folks who genuinely want to solve complex problems, and where we can not necessarily always meet in the middle, but where we can start to understand each other a little bit better, and then identify those areas where we can leverage each other's passion, expertise, and resources. So let's see here. Oopsie. It's kind of weird doing this virtually. Okay, so running for office. So some of the things that I would say is, first of all, if you never planned on running for office, there is a definite learning curve. so if you are sitting there, you know, watching this presentation and you're thinking, yeah, maybe I'll do it, or yeah, I'm totally pumped up, I can't wait to run for office. If you are the latter, then wow, man, I give kudos to you, because this is hard work. Regardless of what office you may run for. So I'm running for school board. It's a non-paid position. So it's a thankless job that requires 30+ hours of your time, and you don't get paid for it. But the reason I'm running for it, the reason I want to serve, is because traditionally the folks who serve, the folks that get to run for school board tend to be individuals who have the financial resources to not work full time outside the home and serve on the school board. I have a lot to say about why I think that is, but that's another conversation. I also think that because it's the school board and because we're dealing with children, the education of children, and oftentimes it's females who are most involved, I do think that may play a big part in why school board trustees aren't paid. The reason I'm talking a little bit about that payment piece is that what I would love to see is that all individuals who have a passion for public education and a willingness to serve would be able to serve. But it's our lower income and our middle income families who can't afford to run for school board, not only because of the hit that it takes on their household, but just the cost of running for school board is, and excuse the colloquialism, but it's redonkulous. It's crazy the amount of money that you have to raise to run for school board, especially if you're running a citywide race, which I am. In the past, you've had school board folks running for this office who are able to loan themselves $40,000 or $60,000. I don't have it like that. so I'm reaching out to folks all over our city. The average donation is anywhere from about $50 to $100. And like, it's really the people, the families, students, alum, teachers, like those are the folks that I'm beholden to. And so I feel really honored to have that growing base of support. So yeah, so long story short, think about what position you would want to run for, be really clear about how your social work lens will influence how you run. I know a lot of folks like to talk about like grassroots campaigning, and that's a great and beautiful thing to aspire to. And you also have to pay for print materials. Like, how are you going to reach people? I just heard this morning that Facebook is, I think they are considering, or maybe they already decided that they aren't going to have political ads on their platform after November. So yeah, you have to reach people. And how do you do that? And especially now in a pandemic, there's that extra layer of public health and safety issues that we have to be mindful of. My social work lens has influenced my race in the sense that, you know, I've said this over and over again, but I believe it in my bones that public education is a social justice issue. That's why I'm running, because I want all kids to have a real chance at success in the classroom and in life. If it wasn't for public education, I know that I wouldn't have had the academic opportunities or even the life opportunities that I've been able to access. And it's not that my particular, you know, elementary, middle, and high school were like, by no stretch of the imagination was I at the like rich public schools, but I was at public schools where I was fortunate enough to have teachers along the way, and really at just the right time, where they encouraged me, and that meant a lot, and it helped kind of craft my sense of identity. And that's what I want all kids to be able to have, is be able to go to school and feel like they're welcomed, and to genuinely be welcomed, and for the educators in those schools to have the resources, the skills, the perspectives, and the support to really see and build from every student's strengths, because each kiddo, each person brings a unique set of strengths. We just have to make sure that we're actually looking for them and then working from there. Let's see, so I'm almost at time. So a couple of last things would be, you know, yeah, cost and when is the right time. I don't know if there's a right time. I mean, I have 3 young kids. My baby is going to be 3 in December. What I was told before I decided to run was that people like me don't run, right? So I'm the primary breadwinner. I'm a Latina. I'm not rich. I mean, we're doing good, but I'm not, you know, I can't loan myself $60,000. And I have little kids. And with all of that, what made me decide that now is the right time is that if we don't have those of us who can make this sacrifice, if we don't, and if we wait for someone else to do it, chances are we won't ever see those of us who can make the sacrifice, make the sacrifice. I think there are amazing people out in the community who would be great on the school board, but they don't have the financial means to do this, or they don't have the supports within their household, or, you know, whatever number of reasons. And also running for office, you know, you get picked at, and that's part of, you know, just being in the public eye, you know, like how can people kind of dissect you? And in that sense, I didn't realize like that my life was actually training me for this moment. And so again, I could talk a lot about that particular perspective, but needless, just suffice it to say that I really feel like I have been training for this moment, and I feel really blessed to be able to run for public office. So, and yeah, like I mentioned, the cost is crazy, but we are also doing really creative things. Like instead of just purchasing campaign signs and literature that we'll be distributing to households and apartments across Austin, we also have volunteers who are just taking good old-fashioned chalk and writing it on the sidewalk and saying Noelita for AISD. So there, you know, let's find creative ways when we don't have, you know, these big, humongous dollars to draw from. Let's find creative ways to do good things. So with that, I will hand it over to y'all for questions and answers.